Okay, so basic photography. In this lecture, we're just going to look at some very simple things like how the camera works and how to set it up ready to start taking photos. Now you've basically got three different types of cameras really. You've got compact cameras like these ones, and the beauty of them is obviously just that they're so compact. You can take them with you wherever you go and you can always get some kind of photo. Sure, it might not be quite as high quality or have quite the same amount of creative control as a big DSLR camera or something, but at least you can get a picture. And obviously the best camera is the one you have with you at the time. Sometimes when people buy their big DSLR camera, they start to dismiss the compact camera and sort of think, that's only for social photography, or you'd never take a professional photo and sell it from one of these or something. And that's just totally not true. You can take amazing photos with these kind of cameras, especially if they're waterproof, shockproof little jobs like this thing, where you can bring it out in situations where even if you had your big DSLR with you, you're not going to bring it out if it's pouring with rain or if it's really dusty or something. You know, at least these kind of cameras, you can always get a shot. Then you've got DSLR cameras like this one, bristling with all these buttons and dials to bring out that creative control to your fingertips, so you can set up the photo to come out the way you want. You can use interchangeable lenses, and in general you just have a lot more control and you can get much higher quality photos. Then you've got sort of in between cameras, mirrorless, micro four thirds, bridge cameras. They still have all the same theory, you know, all the same aperture and shutter speed and all that kind of stuff, but they're just often smaller. Sometimes you can change lenses, sometimes you can't. They're just more convenient, more portable, and increasingly they're doing better and better jobs at taking incredibly high quality photos. Okay, so how do these things actually work? Well, just simply, the light comes in through the lens, obviously. That's where you're doing your zooming and your focusing and so on. But importantly, the light has to pass through a variable sized hole in the back of the lens, and that's called your aperture. And you can set that hole to be whatever size you want. You just tell the camera, hey, I want the hole to be this big, I want the hole to be this big. And the size that you set that hole at controls what's called your depth of field in the photo. Now, depth of field is just the amount of stuff that's nice and sharp and in focus in your shot, in front of and behind the point that you focused on. So you can see this is a very small or shallow depth of field. You know, we've focused the camera here, but very quickly the background becomes blurry and anything in the front becomes blurry. Whereas if you used a different sized aperture hole, maybe you'd end up with a big depth of field or a deep depth of field. And you can see here that much closer is still in focus and much further away is still sharp. And you can see the effect that has on your photos. For a photo of a person, obviously the one with the nice soft background looks a whole lot more professional because the model stands out against that soft blurry background, looks more 3D. Whereas on the other photo, where there's a larger depth of field, you kind of lose your subject against the background. It kind of feels very flat and two-dimensional. You can't really see where the hair finishes and the sticks in the background begin. It's all very kind of flat. But that's actually what you'd want, a big depth of field for a landscape photo, if you think about it. Because for a landscape shot, you want your close-up rocks and flowers to be nice and sharp, but also the distant mountains and clouds, and because everything is interesting in a landscape scene. Now, obviously, if you leave your camera in auto mode, your camera has no idea what kind of photo are you trying to take. It'll just pick a value somewhere in the middle and it won't give you a very good job at either situation. So you can see how much creative control you're going to have just by playing with your aperture, and it's really not that difficult at all. When you actually take the photo, the mirror kicks up out of the way. There's still a shutter in the way though. The shutter will then open and close for a very precise amount of time to collect all that light for your image. And then the mirror will fall back down and you'll be able to see through the camera again. But the amount of time that that shutter stays open for, that's called your shutter speed. And that affects how things that are moving end up looking in your photo. Obviously, if that shutter has only been open for a very brief amount of time, nothing's had a chance to move anywhere while the photo is being captured, so you end up being able to freeze even quite fast movement. But if the shutter is open for a long time, then anything that moves while that photo is being captured ends up being smeared through your image, and you kind of end up with movement blur, which can look really nice in a lot of situations. Not only waterfalls and classic shots like that, but anything that's moving can just add a bit of life if you let the shutter drag a little bit. Let's say you're photographing someone hitting a big drum. In auto mode, you probably end up with a pretty fast photo and the guy's hand's just going to be frozen there and you can't really tell, is he hitting the drum or is he just standing there or what? But if you allowed your shutter speed to be just long enough that the guy's hand could move from here to here while you were taking the picture, you'd end up with this streaky, blurry hand moving towards the drum that might just add a whole lot of life. So there's a lot of situations where having a longer or a shorter shutter speed can really change the effect in your picture. Okay, starting at the real basics, hopefully at least you know how to turn your camera on. Zooming in and out, obviously you just twist the barrel of the lens and you see the image get more zoomed in and more zoomed out. Worth double checking if you've got an autofocus, manual focus switch on the side of your lens. Good idea to make sure that's set to autofocus. If you've got a stabilizer, may as well turn that on. Different brands call it different things. Could be optically stabilized, OS, VR, IS, all these different things. If you've got any switch on your lens for now, you may as well turn it on. Now I'm sure you're all aware, all shutter buttons work the same way in that they're a two-stage button. You can push them halfway down and they come to a natural stop, and that's when the camera is trying to find something to focus on. Zzz, beep, hopefully it does, but it won't actually take the picture until you press the button all the way down. So it's supposed to be that two-stage step. Don't just plunge it all the way and then wonder why it didn't get the photo. Half until it finds it, beep, and then press the button carefully. Now when you're given a camera for the first time, I think the first thing we're always told is hold the camera really steady. And most people just think, yeah, I know all that kind of stuff. But actually, you'd be surprised. I took a photo of the word shake when I was designing these lecture slides, and it was late at night. It was a classic long, slow exposure, gonna have a lot of camera shake in there. And this was holding the camera as steady as I possibly could, but just doing a few basic techniques wrong, like holding the camera the wrong way, the way I see a lot of people hold cameras. And then this is taking the same photo again, but just doing a few basic things right, like hanging onto the camera correctly. So let's take a look at even how you're supposed to hang onto the thing. With your right hand, it's pretty obvious. There's a giant grip there. You can't go wrong. But with your left hand, you see all kinds of awkward things happening just because there is nowhere really obvious to hang onto it. And people end up just clasping the side of the camera often. And that just means you're pressing all these buttons here without meaning to. But the worst thing is you're not supporting the camera. Your left hand is supposed to be underneath the lens. And in fact, the further out along the lens it is, if it's a big lens, the steadier the shot will be, rather than all the way back here just clasping the side. So your left hand underneath the lens, supporting it. That also means you're able to recompose the shot, zoom in and out all the time. You don't have to kind of change it and then come back and hang on to it, and then that's all very awkward. You should pull your elbows in, that keeps it steady. So if you just hang onto a camera like that, it's able to wobble around wherever it wants to be. But if you pull your elbows in, you've just got a nice inbuilt rest, and it just keeps it really steady. And if you're taking a vertical shot, you should actually have the grip on the top of the camera, not the bottom. Because if you have the grip on the bottom, then your other hand ends up tangled underneath here as well, and you can't get to any of these settings on the top, and it's just kind of top heavy, it's just propped up there like that. But if you have your grip on the top, your other hand comes underneath, you can still put your elbow in your chest, keep it really steady, and you can get to all of your settings at once. Yeah, it means everyone can see you've got a sweaty underarm, but that's kind of the way it goes. Don't do these ones. Literally this is up the top, pulling it down, keep it really steady. And probably the most important tip is don't press the button too hard because it just shakes the camera at that critical moment when it's trying to take a picture. It should just be a case of gently squeezing it until it takes the shot. Obviously, one of the huge advantages of digital photography is that you can now look at the picture as soon as you've taken it and check that it worked out. And if it didn't, you can quickly change the settings and take the photo again before your subject's gone. Gone are the days where you come back from the chemist 2 weeks later and then you're flicking through your photos and then you're like, I had the lens cap on or something. But sometimes you need to remind yourself to do that check. When you take a picture and it comes up for 2 seconds on the back, that's because you're supposed to look at it. It's worth your time just having a quick glance, seeing if it seems about the right brightness, maybe zooming in digitally on the little magnifying glass, plus minus, zoom in on the picture you've taken, go right in and check that the detail is still nice and sharp. If not, quick, change your settings and take it again while you still can. So having taught this course a couple of times, there's a few things we've learnt that it's a good idea to try and catch early on. This might not be a problem for you might already have it set up, but it's still worth checking. So when you pick up your camera, make sure that it's on P mode to start with, on your big mode dial, P for program. We'll just sort of use that as a stepping stone from here. It opens up some more options for us, but then we'll move on to using things like aperture mode and shutter speed mode. But for now, you've got to at least get off auto and go to P mode. You want to make sure you've got the right quality setting on your camera as well. Not much good taking low resolution or heavily compressed pictures. So go into your menu, find your quality, make sure you're on large, fine quality JPEG or a RAW file if you're interested in doing that. Now the autofocus in your camera can actually work in one of two different ways. It can either just do a single focus, so AFS or one shot, and that's when it focuses, beep, finds something, and as long as you keep your finger half pressed, if you move the camera around after that, it doesn't shift the focus, so it only focuses once. Or you can change your camera focusing mode to AI Servo, which other brands call AFC for continuous. And that's a tracking focus. So as long as you hold your finger down halfway on that shutter button, it's constantly updating the focus wherever you point the camera. Most of the time you want to be on one shot, AFS, the single focus. So you can carefully focus on something and then maybe recompose your shot a little bit before you press the button all the way down to get the shot. You've probably also noticed that a lot of cameras these days have a lot of autofocus points on them. These are all the different points that when you try and focus, these are all independently trying to find something, anything to focus on. And by default, all of these points are turned on. So they're all active, which means you have absolutely no control over where the camera is going to focus. It'll just find the first thing that's brightest or has the most contrast, and often it's not what you're interested in. Now in auto mode, all of those points are turned on and you can't do anything about that. That's one of the big problems of auto mode. You can't even tell it where to focus. But thankfully in all the camera modes we're going to be using on this course, so that's P mode and anything better than that, you can choose exactly which point to use. And if you just set it to the center autofocus point, that's honestly the most useful point to set it on for 99% of your photography. And then it's very easy for you to accurately choose exactly what you want to focus on. To change which autofocus points you're using, different brands, different things, but Canon has a little button on it there. You press that and then you can choose between your different points. Nikon, in through the menu, autofocus area mode, and you can just go to single point. You can move that wherever you want. Also, if you've ever noticed as you're looking through your viewfinder, if everything just always looks a bit blurry, even the numbers and things down the bottom inside there, that's not your eyes or anything. You've just got to change this little diopter adjustment. It's like setting the right pair of glasses for you. If you bump this little diopter adjustment off, everything always looks a bit blurry. But not a bad idea to go outside and wake the camera up, press the button a little bit so there's some numbers and things displaying in there, deliberately squiggle that thing way out of whack and it will all go blurry, and then just move it back and forth until it just becomes the easiest to see. And you might find that suddenly it's just so much more natural to look through. You don't need to force your eyes to focus on stuff anymore. So in summary, if you're about to start shooting, pick up your camera, check you're in program mode or something better, autofocus on, stabilizing on, check you're on the right quality, high quality JPEG. Your focus system, maybe have one shot rather than the tracking, and then change yourself to the center autofocus point. That's a good place to start. Okay, now that you're all set up, ready to go, the next lecture is on composition. But before we go, I just wanted to leave you with this really tacky cliche, great photos are made, not taken, which is kind of true though, because you find a lot of the best photos aren't just auto mode. They've had a lot of thought put into them. Do you want it to be brighter or darker? Composition, do you put your subject off on the side? Do you want the blurry background or not? There's a whole array of different things under your control to make the photo come out the way you want, rather than the way auto mode gives it to you. So that's what we're going to look at from now on.